And it did clinch it for Manchester United on the opening day of the season against Leicester. He's now been rewarded with, not just because of that goal, but he's been rewarded with a new 5-year contract at Manchester United. To go from where he was and where his relationship seemed to be with Jose Mourinho, how has Luke Shaw turned it round?
I think he's shown a real mental toughness. I think he's been written off so many times at United. Obviously, the injury that he had, it was a horrific injury, and it was at a time when he was starting to hit really good form. Him and Memphis Depay, they had an unbelievable partnership down the left-hand side, and that was the beginning of the end of him as well. He's come back from the injury, and the one thing you would say is that, because I know Mourinho does get a lot of stick, when he gives stick out, obviously Mark will know a lot better, but from my perspective, like when I listen to him, he's not individually going after players about their lack of ability, they're not good enough, they're not this. It's more often than not, he goes on about the work rate, he goes on about the desire, the commitment, the determination. Now, if you look at Luke Shaw's stats,
he talked about his positioning, didn't he,
yeah,
with Luke Shaw?
But it's a lot of the time, it is mainly about them attributes that I've just said. Now, if you look at Luke Shaw this season, he's right up at the top for Manchester United, as in terms of sprints, as in terms of distance covered. So that tells you that he's taken on board what Mourinho said. And, you know, he's thoroughly deserving of what he's getting. The one thing now that becomes an issue is that nobody can really complain if Mourinho does call out any other players by the desire, the commitment, determination, because he will just turn around and go, well, look at Luke Shaw. He's listened, he's taken everything on board from me, and look where he finds himself now. Back in the England squad, just signed a new 5-year contract. First 2 player of the months for Manchester United. And like I say, their best players so far this season.
It's hats off to him, I have to be, because, you know, like Danny's saying, the criticism that he'd received, and there's no doubt to me, 100%, the manager would have been onto him behind closed doors.
Yeah, and not just Mourinho as well, Van Gaal.
No, definitely not. No, exactly. Yeah. So they were onto him. So it was like a common sort of thread there from different managers. So it wasn't just Jose Mourinho. You've got to give Jose Mourinho credit for actually turning this kid around and getting into his head enough to make him turn around, because obviously he has to do it himself. Luke Shaw has to be credited because he's gone out there and done the work himself. So the pennies dropped as well. And, you know, and Jose will actually have a lot more respect for him. I saw a picture today, tweeted, you know, in the media of Luke Shaw standing there with Jose Mourinho and his arm around him. And you can see Jose Mourinho's expression on his face. And it's almost like, see, you know, this guy, listen, took it, rolled his sleeves up, and it was brilliant.
Sorry, I just wanted to go back to the point that you made and check in with Mark, which seems like a reason. Wonder if Jose Mourinho sees the effort. Is that what he wants above all else? Yeah,
he wants to, first and foremost, he'll identify what he believes is a deficiency. And, you know, with certain players, particularly when it comes to the sort of physical side of things, you're unfit, you're carrying extra, I mean, it's an easy one. And it's easy to show players. Some players just still don't listen. I've played with many players in the past that have been told time and time again, and they just don't listen, don't care. Whereas Luke Shaw has obviously taken it on board, and he's worked really, really hard. So he's come off the back of a really horrendous injury, and he's picked himself up, and he's now deserved, you know, being rewarded with a longer-term contract. And the manager, like I said, the manager will have the utmost respect for him because of that. But he won't relent. So he'll keep his foot on him. He'll keep putting the pressure on him, saying, you know what, you've set the bar now, and you've got to keep going. I
think one of the things that I learned from, and it was a really valuable lesson for me from a young age, I was fortunate enough to grow up at Manchester United, and I remember just after I'd made my first team debut, and then I was back training with the reserves on the Monday, and Jim Ryan, who was the reserve team manager at the time, brought through a lot of outstanding players, you know, that went on to have great careers at Manchester United. And he told me to jump in the car with him, so we was at the cliff, and we used to drive over to Littleton Road, and then as we're driving the car, he said, "Have you got anything you want to ask me?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "The last 2 years," I said, "all you have done, whether the ball has been 60 yards that way or 60 yards that way, you've blamed me for everything." I said, "Can you just tell me what it is?" He said, "You're 20 years of age now." He said, "I'm going to give you a valuable lesson in your football career. The day a manager or coach stops bothering with you, stops giving you criticism, he doesn't care about you anymore." And if you look at the players that Mourinho digs out, so to speak, about the commitment, the determination, it's players more often than not that are playing. It's not players that you're not seeing. He doesn't really speak about them, and that's what you find with a lot of managers. If managers don't care about you anymore, they'll go the other way and they're just like, "I'm not bothered anymore," they'll just leave you to. Whereas if they think they can get an extra percentage out of you, however that may be, then they'll keep on at you.
I mean, one of the criticisms that has always been directed towards Jose Mourinho of late is that in his first spell at Chelsea, he never publicly criticised any of his players. But that was a different generation of players. I know for a fact he would dig players out in that change room, behind closed doors. But he would do it and he'd get a response. So now, over the last couple of years, he's been doing it in that change room and he's not getting the response. He knows they're capable, but he's not getting it. So that's where I think he's then gone, right, I've got to, maybe by doing it publicly, maybe, putting them under a little bit more pressure, they'll actually respond in a positive way. Some players can handle it and some can't.
But is that, I don't think I'm giving away any secrets to suggest that you played in a different generation from some of these younger players. But is Luke Shaw an outlier in terms of being able to take that more robust form of criticism and that public form of criticism?
Possibly, and maybe it's because of his setbacks that he's had recently, with his injuries. It's such a bad injury. You can only imagine what goes through his head when he has that sort of injury. Will he ever play again? Will he ever get back to the levels that he was hoping to or were playing beforehand? And I think I think he's somebody that's decided, I'm not going to take this for granted. I'm going to have to put the work in. I'm going to make the most of this situation now. Far too many players only realise when it's too late that they needed to put the extra work in. And for me, Luke Shaw has seen it and realised it, and he's putting the work in now.
I think managers have different ways of doing things as well. It's man management skills, and in different ways, whichever way you want to paint it up. We used to, when we were at Stoke, under Tony Pulis, there was players that probably couldn't take criticism as well as others, and then they would go in the shell. But there was probably 5 or 6 of us, and we knew that at half-time, if he wasn't happy with the performance, you would get the look. You would get the look as you were walking in the dressing room. You'd sit down, you'd see who you were sat next to, and you knew that you were getting it. And it wasn't because he was directly having a go at you, but by him having a go at you, if you've got someone sat to the left of you or someone sat to the right of you that probably couldn't take criticism, might enable them or make them go into their shell. By him having a go at you, every now and then he'd take a look to the right or a look to the left. He's having a go at you, but he's telling them...
How does that work then, if he's saying you didn't do your job properly? It
wouldn't be a case of you individually didn't do your job. He would be looking at you and he'd be making sure if he's getting a message across to the team, at times he would look at you and he'd be directly looking at you, talking about the team as a collective. And then he may dig you out a little bit, but then on the way out of the dressing room for the second half, he'd give you a pat on the back and he'd go, you know exactly why I was doing that. So it's understanding that, and it's a manager understanding the players that can accept it. And maybe he's looking at Luke Shaw and going, you know what? This lad is mentally very strong. So at times when he has dug him out in public, OK, maybe it's to have a little bit of a dig at him, but maybe it's to get his message across to other players that maybe couldn't have taken it.
So it's a stroke of genius then?
Well,
yeah.
You can only look at the way that Luke Shaw's responded.
Well, I remember at Chelsea as well, we had one particular moment. We sat in the change rooms at the training ground, and the manager came in, pulled in a chair, and he sat in the middle of the change room, and he went around every single player in that change room and gave the players that he believed that deserved a serving and ones that he just brushed over because they weren't playing enough. Me, he didn't actually say. He said, basically, I like the way you're training. You're training well. He dug out Frank and said to Frank Lampard, listen, he said, you know yourself, you're not playing to the level that I'm expecting you to play, that you expect to play. So you need to sort yourself out. And he went all the way around to everyone. JT, no one was exempt from the criticism.
But he treated everyone differently.
Yeah, because he knew also which players could handle it and which couldn't. So, and even with some, he'd give them a bit of a kick, a bit of a nudge. And it was just that, I want to show everyone that nobody's untouchable.
Yeah, but managing to do it within the sort of boundaries of what each player was able and capable of dealing with. What do you think the effect can be within the Manchester United dressing room, that you go from a player who has been, yes, criticised by Van Gaal, but Mourinho, the manager now, so he's criticised him, started to turn around maybe in January in terms of his opinion in Luke Shaw, has then seen the improvement in Luke Shaw over the summer, and now in October he's got a 5-year deal. What can that do in the dressing room?
I think other players that are looking at that situation, from a lot of people thinking that his time was up at Manchester United, I would guarantee now that Luke Shaw is probably one of the first names on the Manchester United team sheet. I think he's probably one of the most trusted players within that dressing room, because what he's done, he's had a certain amount of criticism, whether it be constructive, whichever way you want to look at it, he's responded. So from Mourinho's perspective, Mourinho will feel to himself, right, OK, well, if I've done this to Luke Shaw, look what's happened now. He will probably use that as an example to other players, and he'll be saying, listen, I'm doing this for the good of you. And it will be a case of, and I guarantee you, the players that he digs out at times for whatever reason will be the players that he wants. The players that aren't even playing, very rarely will you hear him say anything about him. We've heard him talking about Chris Smalling before. Well, Chris Smalling plays more often than not. Obviously, we've heard him talk about Luke Shaw. Lukaku, different type of play, you know what you're going to get from him. From Pogba at times, there's a little bit between them two as well. And that's because he probably believes that he can get more from Pogba as well.
And the timing of it as well, ahead of the game against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge for Jose Mourinho. Will that be accidental? Will it be coincidental, do you think?
No, I don't think it was intentional to do it before the Chelsea game. I think it's more a case of, obviously they want to get the positive news out there as quickly as possible. There's no doubt. You know, the fact that the negotiations, you know, who knows how long they're being ongoing for, but from the point where it was announced that he was going to be negotiating a new deal to when it's been announced that he'd actually signed.
I thought more from Luke Shaw's point of view, like to give him a confidence boost ahead of a big game, which could be a tough one.
I don't think he's needed it. I mean, the way he's performed this season, I don't think he needs that. I think he understands and sees already that he's had the confidence then of the manager. He's actually gained that respect from the manager by the work he's done. There's no doubt the manager would have been speaking to him at various times throughout the season and the off-season. The question is whether the other players around, certain players around that are not performing at the level that they should be, decide that they want to roll their sleeves up and do the hard work, because it's a hard graft. And some people will just go, you know what, I've got a big enough name, I'm going to find a club elsewhere. And that's the big problem. That's the big question now at Manchester United. Are players willing to really put that work in to turn their seasons around?
I think managers now, in my own honest opinion, I think managers now have the hardest job that they've ever had now. Because, you know, I'm sure it was the same when Mark was playing, but when I was playing, there was dressing room managers. If there was anything going on untoward in the dressing room, people weren't pulling their weight. It wasn't needed. A manager didn't need to do it. In the confines of the dressing room, players would do it. You had on-pitch managers as well. And there still are some around, but slowly but surely they're starting to filter out of the game. You look at some of the fantastic, the world-class players that England have had over recent years. The one thing that will stand out will be leadership, will be leaders, whether it be in the dressing room, whether it be on the pitch. Now, the more that goes away, the more responsibility then comes to a manager to go, well, I've got to manage the dressing room as well as managing players on the pitch. Whereas all he had to do was be a manager in previous years because he had these players that would be his manager type thing in the dressing room and on the pitch. Them days are starting to go now.
Do Manchester United, are they missing Ibrahimovic in that change room?
Hugely. It was something that I spoke about this morning, and people talk about you missing the goals. Yeah, they miss the goals, but they miss him in the dressing room because there was nobody bigger than him. So what you find, if you have this huge character in the dressing room, the one that's leading by example, you follow his example. With Ibrahimovic, that's what it was. He looked after himself unbelievable. I don't think anybody could have imagined how fit he was when he came, and obviously, unfortunately, he got that.
We'd like to show everybody how fit he was.
Yeah, but he was incredible.
Hey,
he just kept going.
Yeah. Why not? If you work that hard at that age, why not?
Yeah, I wasn't criticising, I was just saying.
It's so true. So yeah, to answer your question, 100%. I think if Ibrahimovic was in that dressing room, all the things we see going on, listen, it's harmless stuff. But it wasn't happening when Ibrahimovic was in that dressing room. So we talk about Ibrahimovic being missed on the pitch, but his influence in the dressing room would have been huge because he's one of the biggest characters in the world, but you saw the way that he carried himself.
See him, hear him, pick a sense, any sense. Romelu Lukaku, there's been some criticism of him. It's been a sort of mixed reception for him at Manchester United. Is he key to any success that they might have, particularly this weekend?
Absolutely huge. He's
so
massive.
What do they do with him then?
Well, you want him in the middle more often than not. You know, looking to bully centre-backs, looking to put the ball into the back of the net. But I think the problem that you have, if you go back to the assists last season, so Manchester City, I think last season 53 assists for De Bruyne, Sterling, Sane and David Silva. 53 between four. No centre-forward anywhere to be seen. Manchester United's two highest assist makers last season, total 17. Pogba was first. Lo and behold, Lukaku was second. So you're having Lukaku creating goals, but then you won't scoring goals. And that's what Manchester United are missing. They're missing a De Bruyne, they're missing a David Silva, they're missing a player that can do that. Then can say to Lukaku, you're a centre-forward. We want you in the middle, we want you to be able to put the chances away that we're actually creating for you. And that's a problem. United don't have an Eriksen. They don't have a Dele Alli who was providing service. You know, they don't have what Liverpool had in Coutinho. The front three for Liverpool is very different because they share the goals amongst them. They assist each other. We talk about Manchester City. You look at Chelsea as well, the assist makers that they have in their team. So therefore, I think at times Lukaku gets a lot of unfair criticism because of the simple fact of he wants to be just a centre-forward. You won't see Aguero high up on that list because he's in the middle putting the ball in the back of the net from all the assists that he's getting.
And particularly against top six sides, that's where the criticism really kicks in, isn't it?
Yeah, that's where the game becomes so tight, doesn't it? So chances are few and far between. And if he's not in that box, like Danny's saying, then he's going to have even fewer chances of trying to put the ball in the back of the net. And I think also, interestingly, at Manchester United, one of their biggest problems is they don't have a player like De Bruyne. They rely so much on Paul Pogba to create things. And for me, he's not that creative player. You know, he's never, wherever he's been, hasn't been that player that creates untold amount of chances for opposition, for his teammates. I watched him the other day in France, and they played Germany. First half, Griezmann was almost non-existent in terms of his influence on the game, whereas Paul Pogba kind of was taking on that responsibility. And he was having very little impact against the German side. Second half, Griezmann came into the game and he took over. And Pogba was able to then get back to what he does really well, getting the ball, playing it short, making movement, making himself available, you know, breaking down play. And I think he does that really well. He's got an engine to get back and forth, to assist, to trying to help out the edge of the box, and maybe have a shot on goal. And when he's then given that sole responsibility, or feels like he has to take that responsibility of creating something, I think that's where part of the problem is.
He is going to be judged on goals because he's a striker, but should we be judging him on more than that, in a more rounded way?
I think you have to, because it's okay saying about, you know, you want to put the ball into the back of the net, but he needs chances created for him. So if you go back to the start of last season, Juan Mata, who hasn't, you know, he hasn't featured a lot for Manchester United. He's their highest, chance created. 27 he's created since the start of last season. And then if you look on the list, Eriksen 108, De Bruyne 107. Well, it goes to show that the more chances are being created for you, then the more goals you're going to score. But from Lukaku's perspective, so many times we see him running into that right-hand channel, then other players coming in and taking the space that's been vacated from him. So he's very selfless, whereas I think in all reality, he would love to be more selfish, but he's doing that for the team, when in all reality, there should be players that are actually doing it for him. And that's what Manchester United they're missing one of them players. And I know they're very difficult to come by, your De Bruyne's, your Hazard, your David Silva's, your Bernardo Silva's. They're very difficult to come about, your Eriksens, you know. But if United had a player like that, all of a sudden Lukaku could be in that area where he can put the ball into the back of the net.
But they don't have that player. So what do they do this weekend against Chelsea?
They don't, in terms of, I mean, possibly not at that level, but like Danny was saying, Juan Mata for me is someone that does create all the time. He's got that record, that track record. And yes, the thing is with Jose Mourinho and his players, he wants the players to all defend, all to be able to get back and help out if need be. And Juan Mata is, obviously, we know that's not one of his strengths. However, he does the work. I've watched him numerous times since he's been at Old Trafford, and he does put the work in. He's one of those players. I was there at the Valencia game midway. He was running in one corner, chasing down a ball, getting back. He's the first player to get back a game where players have come on and not making the same sort of movement, not making the same effort to get back. It's not through lack of effort that Juan Mata won't do the work. I
think one of the things we did see from United's perspective, and it only seemed to be for 3 games, and it was Watford, Burnley, and I think it was Young Boys in the Champions League. And it seemed that Mourinho had come up with a formula, because obviously what he did, he had his 2 centre-backs, then he had Fellaini and Matic near enough in front of them. So what happened was then the 2 full-backs had the licence to go forward at the same time. So all of a sudden, instead of Lukaku having to go into the wide areas, the full-backs were the ones creating the width. So then your front 3 at the time, which was more often than not Lingard, Lukaku and Sanchez, they were brilliant together. They were interchanging. Lukaku wasn't isolated. Pogba had that free role to get forward, all because you had the 2 defensive midfielders sitting. So it'll be interesting to see whether Mourinho goes that way against Chelsea. Obviously, probably getting the full-backs to be a little bit more defensive-minded, but that's the way to get it, is in terms of playing that front 3, but having them narrow and getting the width coming from the full-backs.
Go on then. Who's going to win it?
I'm going to have to stand by what I said earlier, and it's not going to be right time. I'm going to go for a draw. I think it'll be a close game. I think Manchester United will look to play on the counter-attack. Chelsea will give everything that they've got, but I am going to go for a
score draw.
Yes, score draw.
That's his Manchester United hat on.
That's my neutral hat on. Neutral hat on.
No, I think Chelsea's going to be too strong. I think just all over the park, the understanding, the performance levels at the moment from most, all of their players is top class. At the moment at United, they're just not firing on all cylinders. There's players who are playing way below par.
You'll be able to watch that game live on Sky Sports. All the coverage gets underway at 11:30 on Saturday.